All right, welcome to the West Bath Planning Board. Tonight we have first a hearing, which is completely separate than our regular meeting. And then we will close the hearing and start our regular planning board meeting. My name is Darlene Estabrook. I am chair of the planning board. Gentlemen, introduce yourselves, please.
Dave Whitney, Jim Williams, Jerry Mitchell, Jamie Wallace.
All other members of the planning board. So a hearing is more to hear from the developer, the owner, what they're going to be doing. It is a forum for public comment, for the planning board to ask questions. What we're going to do for a format is first we're going to have Mr. Diffin introduce and present his project. Then after you're done, we will have the planning board ask whatever questions people have. We're going to try to keep it out of the nitty-gritty weeds of like the application would be, because we're going to do that after. And then after we're done with that, then it's open for comment from people in the audience. Gentlemen in the back, are you here for the development or for something else?
I'm Burtis Brothers.
Oh, okay.
LLC.
Okay.
I'm here for a second off
Okay. All right. Well, then maybe we don't have anyone who has any questions, so we'll see. I just like to ask. So if you just introduce yourself and you can go ahead and start.
Sure, is this a good spot? You want, it sounds like
Okay. Harley's moving it so that she can,
maybe the board.
Just in case the public.
would like to see what you're doing. Good.
And I can pick it up and twist and turn as much as needed, but,
I think you're good there. 'Cause
Yeah.
you got on
okay, we're on camera?
yes, you are.
Sorry. So yeah, we're coming back here. We've been in front of the board last month, and we were, I think, in front of the board back in the fall to introduce a proposed parking expansion on what is called New Meadows landfill project, or landfill, I should say, owned by Maine. I want to start with a little bit of detail on what's out there now, which we've gone over with the board prior, but just as a refresher. It was about a 16.5 acre closed landfill that was closed back in 96, 97 or so. Back at that point, it was permitted for parking and construction laydown through the Maine DEP as part of a solid waste closure permit. That's kind of represented in the green here. The pavement is shown here. It's about 3.8 acres of existing impervious area that is about 250 parking spaces in the enclosed area here that has some material being stored. At the last meeting, the board did ask for more detail on what's being stored out there now, which we did reach out to the folks at BIW, and that is equipment for on shipyard construction. It's tools, it's soil material that's excavated from the shipyard. It's brought here to be tested to make sure to go to the landfill or somewhere else. There are no hazardous materials stored at this site. The environmental folks from BIW.
So why are there Clean Harbors cans out there?
Exactly, great question. So what they said, and I asked that specific question based on your comment, and they said when they have a project on the shipyard that does have hazardous materials, sometimes they'll stage their empty containers here to be stored, then they'll bring them to the shipyard, fill them with the hazardous materials and dispose of them appropriately. Those containers are empty when they're on this site.
So I talked to guys on the back crew for down there, and they suck up all the stuff, it gets tested there, and then some of it goes out. You even said a minute ago that it gets tested.
The soils do, not the hazardous materials.
Well, what does the soil get tested for?
For any sort of like PCB contaminants.
So it's contaminated, so it's hazardous
It
material,
could be,
which is against the code to bring to West Bath. It's right in the
You
code.
You guys
sorry,
let,
there is a
you gotta
different.
let each
yeah.
other talk and finish sentences, please, or we're gonna
Understood.
stop. Thank you.
There is a difference between hazardous and contaminated. I will say that, and we can provide a lot more detail as part of the final plan out there on what is considered hazardous and what is considered contaminated. But the soils are not hazardous. They're brought out here, they're stored appropriately with the soil management plan that the BIW has approved through DEP, and then disposed of at the facility that they can go to. So again, no hazardous materials stored out here. There are contaminated soils, but there are no hazardous materials stored out here. Okay?
Just one thing,
Absolutely.
once the development is done, that will continue or not continue?
The intent
Storage, I
is
think.
to build this all out as
Mhm.
parking for BIW's use, ultimately. So we don't have storage materials continuing out here as part of the final build out. During the transition, during the construction, there may be some of that happening, but once it's built, it's going to be parking. Okay, so this is again, the existing facility, which Spring Road or State Road, wetlands through the center of the site, the RPZ zone we talked about last time. This is our proposed development here, which includes expansion for about 600 more spaces in total. We're looking at 830 spaces. Will be around 8.5 acres of impervious area. We'll maintain the 2 curb cuts, and as you noted, there is no material storage.
How many total spaces again?
I'm sorry, 830.
That would be including the 250 you already have.
Exactly, yep. So it's an expansion from about 250 to about 830.
Thank you.
It will include a bus shelter, a pickup drop-off zone for folks being shuttled to BIW from the parking space. This parking lot will be used sort of to bring people in between shifts, so we don't anticipate 800 people coming here for one shift. It's more going to be one shift will come, be brought over to the shipyard, they'll be come back and dropped off, and they'll pick up the next shift. So that's sort of why we have so many spaces, even though we don't expect them all to be used all at once. We did, as part of this project, again, limit this to the 2 curb cuts that exist today, and Diane Morabito from Sewell will come up and talk about traffic for a couple minutes before, after I'm done rambling on. We did talk about the bus shelter here a little bit. That's shown as a 20 by 40 foot bus shelter, a slab on grade so it doesn't penetrate the landfill cap, and making sure that it's about I think it's going to be a 3-sided structure, so it's not fully enclosed, but it's a kind of more of a weather protection type shelter. The development is fully contained within the existing landfill limits. The intent was to use the old landfill to create more parking available for use by folks at BIW. So maybe at this point I can turn it over to Diane,
Sure.
and then I'll jump up and talk a little bit about drainage, because I know there were some questions last time.
I just had a quick question for you about the parking spots. You said it's by shift, so how many of the spots will be used at one time? Like, will it be about 75% full as the day goes on, or how does that work?
I think they're envisioning 500 or so will be
Okay.
first shift, and a smaller number for the second shift.
Okay.
So I'm Diane Morabito of Sewell, and I did a traffic impact study. We begin a traffic impact study by looking at the number of trips that a project will generate. And in this case, what we did was we counted the existing 250 spaces to determine a per parking space trip rate. Applied that, actually when we did this study, we were assuming 900 spaces. So the study is conservative, we really only have 830 spaces. So the numbers are less than we studied. So what we were looking at for the 830 spaces is anywhere from 14, an increase of 14 one-way trips for certain peak hours, up to 313 new one-way trips in peak hours. What's important to note is that those peak hour trips don't necessarily coincide with the peak hour of State Street. The AM peak for the parking lot occurred from 5:45 to 6:45, whereas the street traffic is 7:30 to 8:30, so it's a little bit later and they don't overlap. And the PM peak hour, they overlap a little bit. The PM peak for the parking lot is 3:30 to 4:30, but the street traffic was 3 to 4, so there's some overlap, but not totally. The PM peak hour volumes that we counted were much greater than the AM, so the PM peak hour was our analysis period. Basically, and we counted other off-site intersections as well. We counted the 2 site drives. We also counted the New Meadows, State and Foster's Point Road signalized intersection, and then the ramp intersections to determine existing volumes. We then overlay the build volumes, the new trips, to those to get our build volumes. And the first thing we look at is auxiliary turn lane warrants to basically see if there's any turn lanes needed on the main road to store traffic entering the site. And what we found is that indeed we do need a left turn lane warrant here because we have so many trips taking a left to enter the site. And so we have proposed a left turn lane on State Road. We proposed it to DOT, and it's in our entrance permit that they have to construct that left turn lane. A right turn lane is not warranted. So what was warranted was a left turn lane, just because the heavy AM entering volume.
And that's an entrance only, correct, on the northern part of the, or I guess northwest of the parking lot? Or is
No,
it,
it's
is it
full.
two-way?
It's two-way.
It is two-way?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's two-way.
Are they both two-way?
Yes, this is two-way as well, but this is gonna be a right turn in only.
Okay.
We didn't want any left turns here. We didn't want to have to build a left turn lane here and possibly impact the wetlands.
Okay.
So we limited this to right turn. Most people, even from the counts, when you do multiple count sites, will take the first drive they come to anyway. So it makes sense that your lefts come in here and your rights will come in here. We then did capacity analysis for the site drives, for the signalized intersection, for the ramp intersection, and under build volumes, fully built, even with 900 trips, which there won't be, or 900 parking spaces, there were no capacity constraints. And we also looked at high crash locations. We looked at an extended area surrounding the site out past the ramps, and there were no high crash locations, so we have no safety concerns that way. And the other safety factor we look at is site distance from the driveways, and those exceed both your town and state standards, so we have no safety concerns. So the only real finding was the need for a left turn lane. You know, it's basically a safety improvement. It gives those left turns a safe place to wait, and it eliminates the potential for a lot of rear ends.
Were there any concerns, people coming down over the hill from like where you're standing, with the speed, with all of a sudden a bus being stopped and slowing down to turn in?
I mean, we did look at a right turn lane warrant, and the numbers are not that great. The vast majority of traffic comes from here. And so, I mean, they're just gonna be slowing down and taking a right. A right doesn't have to stop like a left turn does, because it has nothing opposing it. So it just has to slow to make the turn.
And just to add to that, I think you maybe mentioned it the first time we met.
Someone actually was here in the audience and asked about that,
Yeah.
coming down over the hill, that all of a sudden there's a bus stop, trying to, not stop, but slowed way down to try to pull in there because someone's coming out and.
Looks like
And
we
that
made
sort
some
of thing.
improvements here though, right? I mean, this is getting wider, and it looks like you've got a larger
We got
radius.
a 50-foot radius here to accommodate buses that may be coming quick.
Right.
In that instance, because of that concern. So we did widen that entrance and make that radius nice and large to accommodate that movement.
Yeah, so it's designed for buses where it probably wasn't now.
No.
Yeah, we get a lot more traffic on New Meadows now. Cook's Corner is too busy, so they come down one extra one.
So talk to me a little bit more about what's happening, because the east entrance and the west entrance.
Right.
At the west entrance, there's a storage lane for people headed east so that they can turn left,
Left into the site.
into the site.
And then the road gets widened out some so that the through traffic can go by them.
So
That's what I think.
those lanes are each 12 feet, the
Yes, I
storage lane
believe.
and the inside passing lane, if that's a... Right. So what about people, I guess what I'm trying to understand is what people, if they want to go towards Bath, how are they going to exit the lot?
Oh, they can take an exit from either, they can exit left from either location. You just can't enter left from the second
Okay.
driveway.
So
So
at
here's the
the,
left turn lane, and the through traffic is widening here, the darker gray to accommodate that left turn lane into the driveway.
okay. So those are 12-foot lanes?
Yes, or whatever is out there now.
Well, there should be
If it's,
12.
if it's 11, I'm not sure, I don't have the scale on me.
So if people are leaving the site and going towards Bath, then
They can take a left from either driveway.
yes, and if people are trying to enter the site at the same time,
You have to wait.
they're gonna have to wait for each other to, right? I mean, if you've got somebody approaching from the west,
Yes.
turning onto the site on the left, and they're in that storage lane, in the middle lane,
Yep.
and somebody's exiting from the parking area at that,
Yep.
then there's gonna be, there's,
No, the
they're
left.
gonna have to wait
turn
for
left.
each other to move. Either the storage lane's gonna have to wait, or the guy exiting, or the person exiting the parking's gonna have to wait, right?
Correct. They would overlap each other, correct.
Is this what was originally proposed? Because I thought one entrance was gonna be, one was gonna be an entrance, the other was gonna be the exit, originally.
Now, this was what was originally proposed.
Yeah.
For the buses are gonna enter the first one and exit the second, or proceed through the site. So maybe that's where.
So
we
the
got that
people,
idea.
so the people that are exiting on this west entrance and they're going west, they're joining the main lane. They don't have a storage lane
Correct.
or an approach lane to get onto the,
Right, anybody exiting is getting into their lane, they're not getting, the person exiting here is just getting into a single lane as well. They're getting into their lane, but the left turn lane is only to store the left turns entering the site, so that you don't have rear end collisions occurring.
okay.
Yeah, I think it was the buses that were going in one
And out the
end and
other.
out the
Well,
other,
we're
in the
having-
very beginning.
They're having trouble turning, they have to slow down and
Right,
wait
so
for
that's-
people to pull out, and it's just not wide enough now.
It's-
Right.
So that's gonna be
wider,
cured.
Correct,
Right,
yes.
they're gonna widen it, but I think that's what you're thinking of, is the bus was going in one side.
No, I know what I was
and out
thinking
the
of.
other too.
Yeah, no, I knew that, I knew what I was thinking of, thank you.
All right.
Question on the turn, go ahead, Jim, sorry.
So, I guess my concern is that when people get out of work, they wanna be out there. And everybody else that's around has to slow down and look out for them. Because, I don't know if you wanna call it aggressive or what, but they're leaving these parking lots from the high windlass or the, down by the, the main Works parking lots and so forth. I mean, they'll flood the road and, block traffic, and it's kind of, it's not a good situation. So my concern is I want to see what you're going to do to try and mitigate that.
There are several things. So one, we're getting a really good level of service for the driveway. That basically there's not going to be big delays exiting. The vast majority of people, again, using this lot are arriving from this direction and they're exiting this direction as right. There's this very small percentage of the traffic is taking a left and heading back to that. So and then the other thing is they're arriving in buses that are staggered and not all at once. Because there's only so many buses bringing them back and forth. So those buses are not all, I don't know how many buses they're running, but it's like,
5 or 6.
yeah, so you might have 5 or 6 buses arriving.
Did you consider no left turn?
No. But only no left turn out of,
So you didn't consider it? You didn't even consider that?
no, why would you want, so you'd be sending people a long way for no reason. We have a good level of service, the lefts don't have any delay. There would be no
You
reason
need to
to.
go down in front of the old high windlass and watch them leave the parking lot.
Have you watched them leave this parking lot? Because if they arrive, they
Well,
don't all
there's
arrive
gonna
at
be
once.
3 times the people here than there is now, so I'm not sure how valid it would be.
Our analysis is not showing that there's any significant delay, and we're getting a good level of service. For exiting the site drive, which means that there's no significant delay. And the reason is that the vast majority are right turning. They're not taking lefts to go back to back, they're exiting right to head.
But they can.
Yes, they can if they wanted to. And then in the morning, buses will be doing that.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah, buses will, we have those in the numbers. Other traffic questions, it sounds like.
I'm all set. Anyone else?
I had another question, I don't know if it's gonna be too technical or not for this public part, but, on the east entrance, you've got buses coming down from the east, and they're gonna take a right-hand turn going into that area there. Have you done auto turn on that turn with a car queued there to make sure that that's enough clearance without going into a ditch or sliding into a side of a car?
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can provide that as part of the final
Okay.
application too, if that's helpful.
Just curious, because I could just envision a car there, bus not being able to make the turn, they're stuck in the lane
Yeah,
until
this is-
the car goes.
But it's significantly wider in that big 50-foot radius is really
Okay.
providing for that bus turn.
Yeah, I can't see that far, so I'll take your word for
Neither
it.
can I.
So you're saying the one shift is about 500, and that's the main shift, and then the
The
lesser
second one's
shift
supposed to
is
be 350.
350, but during those changeover periods that you mentioned, it would be essentially all
Well, you need to have empty, when one shift's getting out, the other shift is arriving, so you need to have spaces to get those arrivals before the
of them. Yeah,
first set
It'll be
departs.
20 minutes when it's full,
Yeah,
full.
there'll be a small period when it's all full.
okay. And that would be, yeah, so it would be probably double that of traffic coming and going. So like there would be essentially all 900 or whatever going during those times, either in or out.
Well, they're not all completely filled or exiting in an hour. It's over a couple hours, really. I mean, there's a core hour, but there's arrivals that come before, based on the counts we did, and there's some that come after. So it's not all in 1 hour. It's spread out over a couple hours.
Okay.
Not everybody comes and arrives and
We're
departs
not
at
gonna,
the same
they're
time.
gonna bus everyone there all at once. So
Right,
it'll be loose, so it'll be more.
Ah, okay.
Well, the shift is 7 to 3:30 for shift, first shift, and then it's, so you're gonna have people sitting in there, gearing up for second shift, and then waiting to get to their cars when the first shift
Right.
changes over.
They
You will,
swap.
in theory, have 700 or more in the lot.
Okay.
But not all are exiting at the same time or coming in at the same time.
Mhm.
All right.
One more maybe too technical question. Did you consider any pedestrian safety measures in the parking lot to go from buses to their cars while people are pulling out and?
But we use sort of the retail approach, which is, they can travel down each of the drive aisles. We do have a safe landing area for them
Okay.
at the bus shuttle area, sort of strike area that they can pool as buses are coming in.
Are they gonna be walking across the grass / wetland area?
Well, they better not be. If that starts to happen, there will be some measures put in place to prevent that. Yeah. And it's a pretty wet, it's a pretty,
I can see the person in the
Significant.
back of there walking right straight.
Yeah, I could definitely see
They don't
somebody
think
going right
they
across.
won't do it again, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the
They'll just
back,
bring
the
mock boots
back's
next
gonna
time.
go all the way out and around.
yeah. And there are requirements for us to, or for someone to inspect this annually to make sure that the cover is in good shape, the vegetation is. So we'll catch any sort of wear patterns and deal with those into the time. So if that's it for traffic questions, I can talk a little bit about the drainage question that came up at the last meeting. Briefly,
Or,
we'll save that for later.
I'm on the fence of just saving for later, because you're gonna have to do it again. What do you guys think?
I don't care either way.
Do we wanna open it up to public comment, and we can ask other questions later, or? Because they still have their application.
That's fine, yeah. Yeah, that's
They
fine.
still have their application to do.
Yeah.
So, anyone in the audience have questions for the applicant on parking development? All right. Then, in the interest of time, I am going to close the hearing at this point, and we will move on to our regular meeting. And unfortunately, you guys are third.